Hey everyone, it's Micah with Service Reef, and I'm so happy that we have a conversation today with Will Rogers, who is the Director of Missions at Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And really, it's a conversation about leadership. It's a conversation about how do you look at a program and really try to engage folks in your congregation under your care and be a good steward of the gifts that God's given you and help turn their hearts to using those in a way to get into mission. So we cover a lot of things from leadership and the Unleash program that they're running, but also a couple of things to listen to on towards the end about, just their heart and the encouragement for you within the mission space. And so I'm just excited for you to be able to hear this conversation today. And so without further ado, let me start. And in the meantime, while you're doing it, please go ahead and subscribe or follow this so you get other good conversations just like this. And you can do that below. All right, blessings. Let's get going. Hey everyone, it's Micah with Service Reef, and so excited to have someone today who comes in from a perspective of looking at a lot of different things, globally, locally, et cetera, and making a huge difference in their community and around the world. Allow me to introduce you to Will Rogers. Will, I don't even know your title. What is your title there at Southeast? And maybe give us a little bit of information about yourself.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever have heard my official title. Something in missions. Sometimes it's a pastor, sometimes it's the director, who knows? But something to do with missions.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so tell me about like your Southeast journey. This has been like a culmination of several years, but how did you end up in this
Yeah.
role? Like
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is your role currently and what does your team do?
Yeah. So I actually grew up at Southeast since Southeast, for if you don't know of it, it's a church in Kentucky. We're a multi-site church, and I'm just blessed to be in a church that loves missions. And elders have set a course on that decades ago, and it's just really become part of our DNA. My journey, I grew up here. I ended up moving out to Colorado soon after, um, right after college, which is where you and I met. And one of those times out in Colorado several decades ago, but a lot of good memories on that one. And then worked for a number of different ministries and got to do a bunch of international business development work around the world in some 40 different countries, and ended up back in Kentucky. And after some situations happened with our family, and our senior pastor a few years ago asked if I would step in and lead the missions department as the previous director was transitioning and out of his role. So here I am, a few years into it, and still certainly feel like I'm trying to get my feet underneath me, but it does feel like certain things are starting to come together in a fun and exciting way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I would say that like what's probably universal in getting to talk to a lot of folks in this space, Will, is whether you're a large church or a small church, a lot of it is still trying to figure out like, what is this role? How do we do this? How do we do it effectively? And what's
Totally.
been presented to us.
Totally.
So yeah.
As it should be. I think
Yeah.
I think if you try to take a perspective of like either we've figured it out or we're going to try to figure out the perfect model, I think both of those are just myths. Like there's not, scripture calls us on a mandate, but it gives us a lot of latitude in the method. Not to mention the world around us is constantly changing, so we need to be adaptive to that. And you find a method that works for a while, but it's not going to work forever. So I think all of us need to lead in a way that is very flexible.
Yeah. And if we find ourselves in that space of not knowing, that's actually maybe a good thing. It relies
Right.
more on trust and trying to figure out what
Right.
God's doing within our
Right.
community,
Exactly.
right?
That's right.
Oh, that is fun. Well, give me a little bit about just like as you're looking into 2025, as you're looking into the next, 6 to 12 months, what are some
Mm-hmm.
things that you're getting excited about? Either you or your team there. What are
Mm-hmm.
some things happening at Southeast or within your role that you're getting excited about?
Mm-hmm. I think our vision as a church is probably the thing that gets me the most excited. And our vision statement is to unleash the full force of the church to love people one at a time. And that really breaks into three different chunks. There's this whole side of unleashed, which is mobilization and discipleship. Full force is the totality of the church. And then one at a time is really the way Jesus loved people. He met them relationally, one person at a time. And our department, while it is the missions department, is also responsible for the Unleashed initiative, to help and see our church become more unleashed, which for us is by definition means that we want to help our people leverage their skills and talents for kingdom work inside and outside the church. And so we're working to essentially figure out how to systematize it, but bringing it back to the vision, fully understanding that any great system is only as good as the relationships that it's within. So that one at a time piece on the other side of it is really what I think where the magic is going to be. I don't think it's going to be any system of unleashed. I think it's really going to be in the relationships that are surrounded around that. And I think the daunting thing of that vision statement is the phrase full force, to be honest, because we could probably unleash 20 people super well. But when you're talking everybody or the masses of a multi-site church, is just a different thing. So we're trying to engineer what that looks like. And actually, if you can see it, like this is our pathway, this is our framework for Unleash that we're unpacking as a church, and we're stoked about it. We've been beta testing this, and really excited to say that in the last year we finished with our thousands, as I can't say that word, we've had 1,000 people go through the beta program. I can't say that word, it doesn't come out very well, but we've had 1,000 people go through a program on beta. And man, have we learned a lot. I think we're on version like 37 of our workbook. That's not a joke. I actually think we're on 37 of our workbook. But I think we're finally getting closer to what's going to fit us for this next season. I'm really excited about it.
All right. So I would love to riff a little bit on the iterative process a little bit, Will. But before I do that, let me just back up and ask for those that may be listening and coming in and go like, okay, you're talking about Unleash, but you're talking about it almost like a program or kind of in a process. Can you just kind of like help folks define what is this thing called Unleashed that you're trying to, it's part of your mission statement. Yes. But like, what are actually like kind of tactically, or even walk through your poster or something like that?
Yeah, no, I think there's a few things there. There's a really great book, and I always get the title backwards. And if you're in missions, you need to read it. But it's either When Everything is Missions or When Missions is Everything. And it lays out this framework I think is really convicting, that says when we look at scripture, we see the word mission or missions, and it basically has 4 expressions. And the highest is this idea that missio Dei, God has a mission in and of himself, in his character, that existed before we ever did. And then he creates earth, and he gives the mandate to the church and to the people of Israel. And we start to see the mission of the church. So singular, there is a mission that God's put on us. A person who is missional is someone who's living out the mission of the church. And one of the ways of being missional is missions. So it goes missio Dei, mission, missional, missions. So we are responsible for the missions department, but we're leading the charge of our missional initiative of a church, or as a church, to help our people lean into the mission of the church. So when we talk about unleashed, I would do an equal sign. I would say missional equals unleashed. So I'm trying to think, like, what is this whole thing? So from that framework and that standpoint, what we're trying to do is really just be a guide for people to break down, what does this even look like? And I'll tell you, the most simple way that we think about this is a model of is, be, do. And it's all like, everything starts with who is God, that materializes into who's he made me to be, that then I have the foundations to start looking into what's he calling me to do. But if you're a good North American, you're going to start right on, all right, I'm in for this Christianity thing. What do you want me to do? And it's not that. Like, so it's this upside down world of Jesus that we have to wrestle with. And in Unleash, we try to do that. And it is a program, because when you're dealing with several 10,000 people, you have to have a program. But I think the success, talking about a second ago, of a great program is how quickly you can get it into relationships. So one of our values is the success of a system is how fast it connects you to a relationship. And so what we do in this is we have different stages of, we have 3 different like core stages. We call it coaching internally, but you would go through a 2-hour workshop that we're going, we do them campus by campus, and we just roam around, and we have these things. Hopefully we're going to have them running all the time, probably quarterly at every campus. Out of the 2-hour workshop, then you step into a 5-week small group that's just to unpack the same curriculum that you went through in the workshop, just at a deeper level. And then out of that, there's other resources that are available, or you can step into what we call tier 3 coaching. That's specialty. So someone that raises their hand out of the whole thing and says, I think I'm actually interested in being a missionary, or I'd really like to get engaged in serving with locally with anti-sex trafficking, or when they find a niche that isn't like, oh, I just go sign up on this webpage. Certain things aren't that easy. You need to have some further guidance. So that's what we call tier 3. So the two things for us are is be do as the overall model, which is what we have here for basically we go through like awakening to God's glory that takes you on a journey of exploring to the focus on calling. Then you go on a journey of preparing, which puts you into a life that you are fully unleashed. And then the other framework for us is the guidance pathway tool is going from workshop to small group to specialty coaching. And any one of those pathways can spit you into places where you can be serving inside and outside the church. Was that confusing?
No, actually, no. It makes sense. I was just thinking like, man, this has got to be years of work or thought that's kind of, into this. So it is When Everything is Missions by Denise Spitters and Matthew Ellison, just in case, you want to go find it.
You do anything in missions, you need to read the book. Yeah. It's a fast read.
But I think, Will, when I think about it, I'm like, whoa, in some ways, like looking at the end product is overwhelming. Take me back through the journey a little bit. Like, where did this come? How did, obviously this starts even above you with senior leadership and elders and like the vision of where we want to see the church going. And so I'm assuming that's even a couple years before you that. Help me just, and not in a deep dive, but just kind of in almost like as you look back, what was this journey like? Like, hey, how did it kind of fall together? Because then I'd love to ask some things of like, hey, what went well as you were iterating through? What like fell on its face, right? Like we learned so much from our failures and successes. I try to tell my kids, like, if you're failing, that just means you're trying, right? Like it's, so like, how do you kind of like in that journey, how did you kind of navigate some of those pitfalls? Either internally with staff or just getting others on board. And then I definitely I'm curious about the launch and like, how do you get the vision out into your people? So that's a whole nother conversation, but for that journey, just help us understand, like, how did it get here? Cause it's cool to see it now. And you're like, at the same time, I can imagine myself sitting in a role and being like, whoa, but that seems like a lot of work, or that's too much, or I don't know. Like, how did you get there, Will?
Yeah, good question. And you asked me 3 questions. I'm not smart enough to remember all 3 of them, but I'll see what I can do.
Sorry about that. I do that.
How we got here, we've been blessed as a church to be able to have one of our ministries, and something that we've been able to host for this is our 30th year, is something called the Global Missions Health Conference. And we have several thousand healthcare professionals that come in every year. And I had the joy to be able to work with that for about 20 years. And in it, just clawing on this whole side of how do you guide people into missions work? And it's not easy. And I think one of the things that everybody's path is as unique as who God's made them to be. So then you kind of get discouraged, really, to think like, what's the most irreducibly complex version of what a path could look like? And honestly, I think that has been in discussion for us in missions work that we've done through the conference and here at Southeast for well over 10 years. Like, this is something that we've been really not cutting our teeth on. That sounds like we figured it out, because I certainly don't think we have. But something we've been banging our head against the wall. Let's say that, like, as we've been trying to map this out. And that's really where we landed on this model. Like we wanted to do a picture that I could look at this and be like, that seems fairly simple. Like I'd sign in for that, So in some ways, like, this is the picture that we're trying to sell. I think the truth of it is, though, your journey looks like 200 different steps and pieces along the way, that if we were like, hey, we got a great plan for you all as church members, it's only 200 steps, you're going to love it, no one's going to sign up, right? So it's just like, that's not the way. And we even like to say that when you look back on your journey, if you're later in life and you've been walking with the Lord for a while, and you can see the journey He's taking you on, it is not linear. It looks like spaghetti. I'm like, I don't even know if I can pick pathways out of it. I'm like, it's just like a bowl of spaghetti. So I'll just tell people, you can't sell spaghetti as a pathway to get somewhere, but I can sell this. So what we've been trying to do is like figure out like what's the thing that's the simplest. So the idea is we do, and then the stages that we have on our map and our framework back here. And we really try to bring things down to frameworks, so that we have something that's in commonality that we can come back and talk about and reference as we go through things. So then then as we were iterating on this, we've tested it with college age students, we've tested it at campuses, we've tested small groups, we've tested it at conferences, we've tested we've tested this all different ways. I think our number one biggest mistake is we are consistently trying to get through too much in too little time. And we keep and we're not there yet. Like we keep refining things down and refining things down. What we want, I think one of the pieces that we're learning in the science of it, if I could call it that, is there's 8 pieces of data that we want to collect on our members so that we can better guide them to ways that they can connect and serve. And off the top of my head, there are things like spiritual gifts, strengths finder, areas of interest to serve inside the church, outside the church, their professional field, passion areas, service skills, and there's one or two other things in there. But that's the algorithm that we're building to be able to connect people and to find ways that we can serve. And that's where you and I intersect with Service Reef, and how Service Reef has been helping us build the tech tools to be able to build that algorithm to make those connections. But we want to collect those pieces from people because we believe that every person's journey is unique. So that if I can find out that you're an engineer interested in something globally, then like, well, light bulbs go off and like, hey, did you know about this? Like, what if we got you connected over here with this organization to do this thing or whatever that might be? And it's tricky because it's not a one size fits all. We like to say like we are shifting our missions department from being short-term trips to placements, and we need to stop thinking about, oh, we run 80 trips a year till we place 1,000 people a year. And on those 80 trips, it's like, because it's not a list of 80, it's 1,000 individuals that we are hopefully purposely placing somewhere. And the only way we can get there is if we know some of that data on people. And then I think the last thing I'd say is what we're learning. We were hopeful. I was significantly hopeful that we would do like this great big rollout and it was going to be awesome. And it would have been a total fail. I mean, I don't even mean to like, I can't stress enough total. It would have been a total fail because what we've done is we've just gone campus by campus, and every campus we learned so much. And we're blessed to have 12 campuses. And what we're going to do is we're just going to run through all of them. And once one gets spun up from its initial, then they can start doing them on their own. And we're just going to keep learning, and we're going to keep iterating, and we're going to keep changing our curriculum and our slide deck and our process. But I think we're 95% the way there for what we're going to run for the next 3 to 5 years. And then who knows after that. So I think it's actually served us well to not go big blitz, but to go pace ourselves and then to learn as you go. And you're going to find some of our campuses are more like, hey, we'll take a risk at it. And there's other campuses like, you're not coming here until this thing has some things that are ironed out. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like we'll get some stuff ironed out. And then you start to build data and start to see your metrics, and things start to shift on that too, which is pretty exciting.
So, okay. So, and then I have to ask, just in case, like for those, like, is there a place where others can go learn about this or even like see the materials or anything there?
Sure.
Like, Will?
Yeah. And this is a strategic initiative of ours that another piece, we just feel blessed to have a team of people that is in our missions department that's putting some these resources together. So we're doing our best to not brand it Southeast, but to brand it Unleashed, which is a part of Southeast, but to make it something that any other church could use. And as far as I can tell at this point, like we're going to have it out there for just free for organizations, for mainly churches to be able to have access to. And we got some things to figure out, like maybe a place where we'll load the workbook to Amazon, and you can buy the workbook from Amazon. And we're like, we don't care, but you need it printed so you can have the workbook, and we'll figure those things out in time. We're not fully there yet, but you can start to see the initial things that we're building out for our church members at SE for Southeast, seunleashed.com. And that's a place where we're starting to put some of this. And then mid next year, we're hopeful that we're going to roll out an entire church kit that other churches could have access to and be able to download our business plan, our operational models, all of our slide decks, all of our downloadable resources, all of our like promotional posters, and we're going to have all that on the site here sometime.
That's awesome. What a cool heart, Will. That's awesome. can benefit from all of this iterative elements too, right? And um, help me understand, just like walk through the decision making. I'm gonna dive into one piece of it. And as you were launching and trying to get this out, you decided to go campus by campus. You kind of avoided a big launch, right? And we've all seen that. We're like, all right, we're pushing. We put all this energy, we put all this focus into like this huge launch within our church or within our ministries. Um, you chose a different path here, and maybe that was just
I didn't choose
accidental.
it.
Okay.
It was I had the other path and it was changed. And in the Lord's sovereignty, it was this is the better path. Like for us,
Okay.
this has been the better path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just think it's cool because when you grow at grassroots like that, it is more effort, but you get the chance to learn and iterate over that time. And so the
Right.
final product is so much better, right? So that way, by,
Totally
hey,
so.
in
Uh-huh.
6, 12 months, okay, now we're releasing this fully. A lot of people gone through. You have the testimonials, you have the other things of, how folks have been
Yeah,
leveraging
you
it
do.
to kind of change their
You do.
perspective.
And you have, I don't know if I have here, I know I just jumped off the screen there for you, but
Oh, you're totally fine. I'll make for great video later.
yeah, we, like these are sections of our workbook that'll all be together. And but just having resources that are hopefully well designed and professionally built out for walking people through what you're going to do in the workshop and the exercises that people have and explaining how you put things together. And then as you get near the end, you start to piece and build out your entire what we call your unleashed life plan and what that looks like and how that comes together. And then all that ties into drawing people back into the mobile app resource that then puts into technology so that we can scale and go further faster with things.
Yeah. So as you think about it, well, just is there a story of someone? I mean, change their name or whatever, but like, is there someone that like, hey, you're doing this workshop, leading it, working it, any kind of story that resonates of just like, wow, first of all, like, God, that was only you, right? And then
Yeah.
second, like in that space, when you start to get folks to be in touch with who they are and who they were created to be, that kind of starts to like help fit some pieces together. Cause I also am one that likes to punch a bunch of content out and talk very fast, right? Like this is, and so I could totally see in that space. And you said earlier, man, one of those things is like we have to just learn to kind of slow down and let people discover that a little bit. And so
Mm.
I'm just kind of curious if any stories come to mind in kind of that vein or anything that any kind of other kind
Yeah.
of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. And because it's neat when it hits the person. I remember speaking with an individual that went through the process that's been around in our church for a while. Um, and I remember seeing them at one of the workshops and being like, man, they're just, I mean, I'm ready for the skepticism afterwards. And they come up to me. I was like, oh, here it comes, and he said, I've never been through a thing in the church that acknowledged that I have skills that aren't like, I forget the word that you use, but like it's always wanting to talk about skill sets that are, and do you want to serve in the nursery? Do you want to go to youth camp? Which are all highly necessary things. But he's like, I'm an accountant. I'm more introverted. This thing or the other. And and he's like, to have that first just acknowledged and then to see that we as a church are trying to figure out how you could take my accounting skills and there are like, I mean, we have, I can tell you right now, even on a church side, like we need your help. But I don't know how to ask you for help until I know who you are that has that skill set. And which then dovetails back to just a theology of work that we have, that we believe that every profession is ministry. There's not a division as sacred and secular. And I think that we live in a false dichotomy in our world today that has largely marginalized 99% of our church. So when we look at things like, we're like, hey, here's the deal. It isn't if you feel called, like you are. It's just period. Like that's just the way that it is. And your profession is one of the means that the Lord has equipped you to be able to influence things around the world. And man, I mean, and stories that then come out of that light bulbs that go off for people like, oh, wow, that's man, I could go on all kinds of stories where working on our Arabian Peninsula project and trying to have professionals sent over there to take roles. And I mean, there's all kinds of things that we're working on that go down that path. Uh, but back to story, talking about that one gentleman. I know about another. Um, I think, let's see, Sean was a senior at the time, is now in college, that was super frustrated with having this, just living in this conflict. And it's like, I've just been frustrated because I want to go. I just love cars. But I feel called to ministry. And I'm like, Lord, why'd you give me a box of rocks? Because I don't know what to do with these things. And then it's through this that you're able to start to vision cast and to lean into these things. And so now he's looking at the potential, like specifically, I mean, catch this, specifically wants to go work with Formula One racers. I mean, very specific. But you know where a lot of that is? A lot of that's in closed, restricted access parts of the world. And if he can follow that path, he can have a chance to use the professional skill in some of the least reached parts of the world in a way that you're like, how in the world would you ever get into that avenue? That I think these workshops really just another one, like it started to illuminate something like, oh wait, like God's got something for this for me inside of this. And I could tell more and more stories like that.
That's awesome though. That is so awesome. And just encouraging too, because I think it is in that space, right? We're all called into this. And so how do we start to break down some of those dichotomies or false beliefs in there and I'll say, like, even for me last year, one was just like this idea, and I don't know where it came from, but like, oh, I can get to this certain level, I have enough intelligence, or I understand God enough, or I've read the Bible enough, I'm like, I'm done, like I'm good, I can just coast, right? And you're like, no, like we're never done, right? Like this is, but those kind of false dichotomies kind of fall into your, like, without even really intending to, and suddenly you realize, man, the gifts, the experiences and skills that God's given you can be used in so many different ways. So,
well, you and I were talking the other day just about just the beauty of becoming and how that's the journey that God has us on. So buckle up because you're on it. And it's like just a reminder for me, but it's just and I think especially like you spend time, I think Romans, like read Romans with the perspective that we are in process, that we are becoming something. And I mean, like it's all over Romans. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and in that context, then you all of a sudden 8:28, others start to come in of all things work together, right? Because he's working in this completion for you. So it's a good pull. Okay. So tactically, like help me understand, and it is, I come from Service Reef, so I have to ask at least a question of how does your team currently use Service Reef, and how is Service Reef kind of being put into place to help drive some of this unleashed vision that you're hoping to scale out?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see if I can even catch all the different areas. Um, so I guess the bread and butter, we run all of our short-term trips through Service Reef, which has been a real lifesaver for us on our capacity. And we have goals internally of increasing and even doubling the amount of people that we send on short-term trip. And that's not even a conceivable goal.
Place into short-term trips. Well,
there you go. Thank you.
I'm trying to capture the language.
I like it. I need to do better about that myself. But we couldn't even dream about that as a stretch goal if it wasn't for having a tool like Service Reef that does a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and working with you guys to figure out. We worked with you, Micah, on figuring out some specific things. You've kind of process engineered some stuff for us, like where are you spending a stupid amount of time on something that we might be able to automate a little bit better. And we're right now in development of a few of those things right now with you. We are more and more going to be using tracks as a tool to be able to equip and train our short-term trip leaders and try to more institutionalize a lot of those lessons and have those on an online. It almost feels like an e-course. I know you don't call it e-course, but it almost operates like that. As we get into, I talked about a little while ago about stage 1, 2, 3 and 3 coaching. the whole idea of specialty coaching and trying to walk with someone that says like, hey, I'd like to be a missionary or a church planter. We're going to be setting all that up in pipelines as our kind of like your CRM, like your sales flow in a sense of how we're walking with people from point A to point wherever they're going. Um, Tackles a lot of our communications, all of our donation management, the mobile app, having we have the SE Unleashed mobile app, and that is a place that people can go find opportunities. And that's been great. I mean, you can go find opportunities, but based on your profile, I talked about with those 8 points of information, opportunities are recommended to you smartly, through that algorithm. And then you've got building in the life plan for Unleash into the mobile app has been great, because then we can just have people right in the workshop open up that app and then drop the things right into the app, so we have it captured. We Man, Micah, what am I missing? Like I'm probably missing like one or two like major things, but there's a few.
Yeah, the only other
I know
thing that comes to
one.
mind is
I know one. Groups. Like we're getting ready to go hog wild on groups. I am pumped about this. That one of the ladies on our team is leading this initiative, but we leverage the tool. So in Service Review, you have groups, and you can connect attendees from a short-term trip into a group. So what we're doing is we're creating alumni groups for every one of our partner organizations that people can go serve with. So then you got, like, we work with a group that we love over, I'll use one as an example, Pro-M, that's over in Poland. We think over the years, we just had an anniversary that we did with them. We've had 30 years of partnership with them. We think that we've had around 800 people that have gone over the years and served, that we can at least go back to our logs and look over the last 30 years. What if all those people were part in the mobile app and part of that alumni group? And anytime something new comes out for Pro-M, we can let people know about that. If we're going to do a gathering or if someone's in town from Pro-M, but they're all together, and like there's affinity in that. Like people, where they go, they have that affinity, and we as a church, like this is a huge win for us that we can keep these like sub tribes together of alumni that have gone to serve in different organizations. So we haven't rolled that out yet, but that's like mid-year. Like we're hopeful to have that as trips like really start to gain momentum this summer. I'm pumped about that. So there's one more, groups. You probably got a few more, but that's what's on my mind.
the other one that came is just kind of that initial Unleashed initiative of aggregating all the different opportunities, like that tangible go live now of
Yeah,
getting your partners in. Just tell me a little bit about how that kind of came about.
dude, this is let me call it an organizational nightmare. Like there's no great way to do this. Like, so let me just tell you the approach that we took. And I don't know it's the best approach, but it's the approach that we took. And we did 2020 when we brilliantly launched the first version of this during COVID, which, I mean, come on. Like, this is, so we're in 2.0 launch of it right now. And this specific thing will be
Okay, and explain
relaunched.
explain a little bit about what it is. Like
Okay.
what is that piece?
So we have about 50 local partners that we work with. And what we wanted is we wanted to know what your skill sets are, and we want to know what their opportunities are, and we wanted to marry those together. But we wanted to minimize the work. Like it didn't make any sense for them to fill out a form, and then we take that form and we load it somewhere, and then we sit down with someone and we cross-reference it and we look at it. It's like, how much can we set up that's just systematized? So what we ended up doing is working on Service Reef, we funded as a church all of our local partners to have a Service Reef account so that they could load their own serving opportunities, and they had a tool to manage all their own local serving. They could do it on their own, but it's connected to Southeast. So every one of those that they put a mark on that's like Southeast available aggregates into one spot for us. So then I've got one place that I can point people like, hey, here's a list. And then you take your life plan, your profile of your skill sets and your professional fields, and it marries them together. And it says, hey, here's what we recommend that you should go look at and go do. So we did a light version of that several years ago. We ended up seeing it was right under 1,000 people signed up to serve with local organizations. Some of them were like one-time events. Many other people have gone to serve, iteratively over time with people. But we want to put a lot more fuel on that. It's been a little bit dormant, to be honest, on how we've been managing it, because we've been trying to get our ducks in a row for like how this whole system is going to be working. And later this year, we're going to have like the full roll, like the rollout of what we're doing now. So I guess the long and short of it is we are trying our best to work to equip our partners. If I think, here, maybe the thing of this is the easiest way: supply and demand. As an organization, they have demand. They need people to come serve in various capacities. As a church, we have people that we're trying to equip to go. So we have the supply. And as you're going through, you have to be building both. Like, I need to be building the capacity of our supply and our demand. So on our demand side, with our partners, we're trying to equip them with the tools that are efficient and easy and help them be more successful. And then we're trying to do this on our side to have a better supply pipeline to get people out there. And then hopefully those two things build together and it makes that connection.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. I want to look out a little bit further. You're in a unique role where you get to talk. I know this is the fun part. Well, there's no script. We're just, hey,
I'm a little scared. Okay.
No, but like, you're in a position where you get to talk to a lot of other large churches, organizations. You're very connected to the global move of God around the world, right? So put your forward, like, Nostradamus hat on for a second. Like, where do you see missions going in the next like 3 to 5 years? I think beyond that, maybe a little bit too much to ask, but just in the not near future, but kind of in the future, are there trends? Are there things that you're thinking about, processing, trying to prepare your team or your people for, even beyond like this launch and this phase, more for where you feel and see how God's moving in different areas?
Sure. I'll pick one that, and the reason I'm gonna pick it is because um, we're hedging a lot towards this direction because we believe that this is the way things that they are heading. And in some ways, man, if we're wrong, great, but it doesn't seem to be that's the case. So I'm gonna talk about some problems that, like, what's happening right now. There's less interest in short-term trips across the board. While it's still wildly successful, there's just things that it used to be, you throw something out there and like you had people, and unless you have some good strategies on getting people into it, it's just become a little bit more difficult. I'm thankful that we still have a ton of people on our side that are really, really interested in going. But there's difficulties there. Finances, and we hear that it's more difficult to raise funds. It's more expensive to travel internationally. There's different trends from, I'm sure you probably read things like When Helping Hurts, and that I think as a global church are getting more wise about ways to do missions in a way that isn't hurtful to others. So I look at it as like all these things converging together. But I think the perspective that is most helpful is to recognize that our definition, anyone that's living right now, lives in an era that understands missions in a time period that is unlike any other time period we've ever known. And what I mean by that is especially the North American church has been more wealthy and opulent than we've ever seen before. And also in time that we've had availability to be able to travel. So you've never had a time period in history where short-term trips were like huge, right? I mean, like, for obvious reasons that they didn't have the tech to be able to do that, but also the financial resources and some of the other like just trends that were there. So the key thing for us that we want to lean into is we think the last 100 years or 125 years of missions is an anomaly. And while we hope that we can still run it as long as we can, we want to be winsome to say we don't think that's actually what the majority of history would prove to show the model of missions is. So I say all that to say what we call traditional missions now of fully support raised short-term and long-term short-term trips, long-term missionaries, is more of an anomaly historically and biblically than what we've seen. What is really more traditional, or what's more on the historical time frame, are things like marketplace workers, people that are tent makers, that are bivocational, and that are leveraging their skills inside of a professional area somewhere. So I don't want to marginalize or minimize short-term trips, or what we know as more fully fundraised missionary engagement right now, because I'll tell you, we are all in. Like I fully believe in it, and we as a church, we are all in. But we're also diversifying our portfolio, if you will, to really try to invest in equipping and sending professionals to least reach parts of the world where they can go get a job and keep doing what they're doing, that they love doing, that they're in relational connection with other people, day in and day out, through things like healthcare and education and business. And like, I just go on and on. And I can tell you story after story on this. So a trend I think that we need to lean into at just a base level is calling our professionals into a vision of leveraging their skills for a season or longer somewhere around the world that desperately needs both their skill and Jesus. And it opens up a tremendous way to be able to share about the Lord that is really hard in other mechanisms. I can tell you some stories about that are kind of comical, but it really it's an amazing thing. And when we go through the teaching of it, like, hey, we want to go through like biblical characters to talk about like where have we seen this throughout history. You see it in Esther, she's a queen. You see it in Daniel, he was an advisor to the king. You see it in David, he was a king. You see it in Joseph. I'm like, I go through multiple things. Like if you look at scripture, especially the Old Testament, and you look at people like, oh, they led through their profession. Stop for a second. Like, why are we not doing this more in missions work around the world? So it isn't it's not negating the other things that are there. It's just diversifying our portfolio to lean into other ways to be able to mobilize people in the kingdom work.
Yeah. And Will, I'd say like in that I've seen those short-term trips, the other things to Mexico, the other thing, like is a
Mhm.
gateway that God can use to turn their heart
Totally.
into something else, right? Like, I mean, how many
Totally.
of us, that was the first experience we had. So I totally hear you of like, we are not negating that experience or anything in that, but saying we can also call others who have felt left behind
Yeah.
in their, because they're like, I don't understand how to use this stuff. And
Right.
now all of a sudden going, wait, that's not an inhibitor to me going into missions. That's actually
Yeah.
intentionally placed into my life so that I can go out and
Right.
serve well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. But I don't know. I could give you enough to share enough of my heart for the value of short-term trips. Like it is, uh, I've seen data. I don't have it sitting here in front of me, but what short-term trips do to further people's journey with the Lord, to disciple them, to uh, instigate or to be a catalyst for what's next. I know one of the stats is one of the most significant ways. Like, how about this? If you need volunteers in your church and your kids ministry, send them on a short-term trip, because more than likely they're not going to move to that location and become a missionary. But what they're going to come back is they're going to come back lit up, and they get lit up to come serve in the church. So what stats and studies have shown is that one of the best ways to generate volunteerism in your church is to get those people on a short-term trip, and it lights them up.
Yeah. But I love also the heart of saying, but that's not the goal. Like,
Right.
attending a trip is not the goal. The
Mm-hmm.
purpose here, going way back to the beginning, is we want to live missionally, right? Like we want
Yes.
to live on mission with Christ as we
Right.
partner with him for what he's doing around the world. And so
Which
that is a step. Yeah.
which gets to your other point about we're in process, that
Mhm.
we're becoming. Like it's that you're never. I love the Annie Stanley years ago had the phrase "think steps, not programs," and like the success for us is not how you did on the trip. The best success that you're ever going to have on a short-term trip is what happens in the life of that person afterwards. Like that's what you're running after. It's not the trip itself. and
Yeah.
and lean into it. It's the hardest thing to lead. My default is that we're going to put 95% of our energy into preparation and the trip, and then we hope something happens afterwards, unless we intentionally lead and lean into what happens afterwards. And I challenge everybody, like, you got to think more that way. That's what we're doing. Hold on here. I'm geeking out here. I'm sorry. I'm talking too much.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. So this process, and the sun's coming in on me here. This process, we actually do the 2-hour workshop for every one of our short-term teams in their preparation retreat before they go out on the field. While they're on the field, we have a specific curriculum as a church, the way people go through, that lines up with our theology of missions, our philosophy of missions. But then when they get back, one of our expectations is that our short-term trip leaders are a small group leader to do the 5 weeks of curriculum for Unleashed, because what happens after is more important to us than what happens on the actual trip. So that we're able to leverage the Unleashed curriculum to help us actually do the same thing, to mobilize people after the fact.
How Help me understand, like, where do you start training your team leaders then to prepare them to shift the mindset as well, right? Like, so this is a mindset of like, I totally hear you. We need to put more time on the end of it and like make sure that's the emphasis. I love how you said that there. How do you start to get your team leaders on board with that
Yeah.
vision of understanding that your goal is not just to get back safely? Whew, everyone survived. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, no, your goal is actually like the weeks beyond that in that space.
All right. I'm silent because I don't know. I don't know the answer. So I'm gonna give you a few things I think. One, I think it's who you select as team leaders, and that takes time. I think it's who's been raised like in the system that knows Unleashed and is like, no, I've been through it, and like I've got my profile, and I've done a few groups, they've done that. Um, we have our criteria for who our team, what a team leader is, so that's been really nice for us to have a job description towards that end. We do an annual team leader training. We talk about tracks, like we're going to be putting a lot of that curriculum for team leaders on like online, so that when we do our team leader training, it's like, hey, you need to have all these things done on your own. But then when we come together, we want to talk more about the heart of what we're trying to do in all this. So I think it's a combination of a number of things. I don't know if I could tell you that full combination right now. Um, and I will tell you, it is one of our strategic areas that we know that we desperately need to grow in.
And I would say you're not alone in that, first of all, from all the organizations and others that I work with on a regular basis. But just having that heart and that vision for like, hey, the most important thing that's actually going to happen is happening in the life of the individual. You just don't know the ripple impact that has, right? And so
Right.
that focus is key. Well, okay, as we wrap up or start to wrap up here, like, is there any piece of advice that you would share with others that are kind of coming into this missions or mobilization space? Anything from the last few years of just like, do
I
this,
know.
don't do that. I don't know. Okay, go for it.
Stay the course. It's hard. Like it is, uh, it's worth it. I'm consistently confronted in scripture on the dire importance of it. And if you are in missions work, I think one of the things I would encourage you on specifically is what you're doing is discipleship. Like don't divorce yourself and thinking like, well, there's discipleship over here and there's missions over here. Missions is one of the most phenomenal ways to disciple our people. Like you are discipling your people in this process. And I mean, everything else is just tricks, tips, techniques, like strategies, frameworks, and so on. But the biggest picture is like you have the opportunity to invite people into something radically unique, and in that to be able to disciple them. I mean, it's I mean, even think of it like this: how many Starbucks meetings would it take to impact someone the same amount it would going and journeying for a week to 2 weeks somewhere overseas on a service project mission trip? I don't know. I mean, it's just like, so I just would encourage you in that, like you have the unique opportunity to disciple people in a really unique way.
That's awesome. Any book recommendations, podcast, follow recommendations, anything that
And, and
pulls
there's so
your
many good
soul?
books. The ones that we point people to the most, we love Piper's Let the Nations Be Glad. Uh, we're still fans of When Helping Hurts, and think the principles that are in there are really, really solid. The one I mentioned earlier, when everything is missions, or when missions is everything. um, and I mean, Platt's Radical was great. I think from a operational standpoint, some books that are really helpful. Four Disciplines of Execution is a really great book if you're trying to figure out just better ways to lead and to get some of those objectives taken care of. Um, and uh, and then there's a bunch of books that we really try with all of our missionaries, and this has been convicting for us, but to try to lean into like soul care, and there's a whole litany of books that we have, um, from Every Moment Holy to the I don't have them right here in front of me, but there's a whole series of other books that we really try to recommend and resource our missionaries with, to just try to really take care of their heart and their soul. So yeah, there's a bunch of good books that are out there.
Where can listeners or those that are hearing engage with you more, Southeast more, Unleashed? Like you said, I think the site earlier was seunleashed.com to see some of that.
SE, that's right. Yeah, that's the best place. Just go check out seunleashed.com. I, what would have been really nice right now is to have a page I could specifically send it to you, and maybe by the time, actually, Mikey, that you push this out, maybe we can include that,
Yeah.
somewhere. But we will be doing a rollout of what we've learned and done in all of this, so that we can give it away to churches, and sometime next year, and so be looking for that. And I think we're even going to do a conference to walk through in more detail for missions leaders, to getting into the nuts and bolts. Like, here's exactly what we've been doing, and again, I'm going to say we haven't figured it out. I just know that we've got um, around 20 or so people on our team that have been working to develop this, and I just have a stewardship conviction that we just want to share it. And if it can work for you, use it. And if not, then whatever, but we want to get that out there. So, yeah, keep checking seunleashed.com. That's where we're going to have resources for that.
That's awesome. Well, is there any question you wish I had asked, Will?
No, you did great.
Okay.
Awesome questions. You're always good at asking questions. I'm
So,
I'm not. So you did a great job.
well, you did a great job in answering them, Will. So it's all good. It works
Yeah.
out. It works out. So, well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, Will. This has been an
Yeah.
awesome conversation.
Well, thanks for letting me join you. And anything you need in the future, you know where to reach me.
That's awesome. Thank you. Hey, everyone, that's Micah again. And that was such a cool conversation with Will. Hopefully you are encouraged, especially there at the end of just, hey, you are in a role of discipleship. You're carrying and stewarding these folks' journeys well. It is not just about the things that you have to do, but really be able, and there's always, we get in the tasks and the other things that need to get done, right? And just Will's encouragement there to be like, no, we're helping shepherd that person to a fuller and better engagement of who God's created them to be, and using the skills and talents and expertise they have. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Please subscribe below, and follow us. And that way you can get other great content like this. In the meantime, blessings on you and have a great week.